Well, welcome everyone, clients, friends, and my professional colleagues. I'm Evelyn Zolan, a regional director and a senior financial planner on the Apella Wealth team. We are really excited that you're joining us for this conversation today that we think is relevant to just about everybody. How a financial planner can make a meaningful difference during life's most challenging transitions. Because transitions come in a lot of different forms, right? They can be joyful, they can be retirement, a welcoming a new addition to the family, a baby or a grandchild, or starting a new business. And some transitions can be a little less joyful, like divorce or loss of someone we love, or maybe a sudden change that we just really didn't see coming. I'll tell you what they all have in common, though, is this: they come with big questions, they come with strong emotions, and a lot of financial consequences. And that is where a skilled financial planner doesn't just show up with spreadsheets and software, but with perspective, with some partnership, and with a plan. And so I am very happy today to be chatting with a couple of my colleagues, and we'll be asking a lot of questions about how does a planner help navigate life's big transitions. But before we dive into that, and before I introduce our terrific panelists, I've got a couple of housekeeping items. One is we are recording this our webinar today, and we'll share it with you once compliance has had a chance to give it the thumbs up after the webinar is finished. Also, we welcome your questions. And so down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a Q&A box. Please click on that. And any questions that you have for us today, please enter those there. We will save some time at the end of our conversation today to answer those questions. And any that we don't have a chance to answer, we'll be sure that your planner follows up with you in response to them. So today I am joined with two of the most thoughtful and experienced certified financial planner professionals in our field, Julie Hurd and Ross Richardson, who've seen just about everything and help people navigate big life transitions with grace. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with sort of a big picture view, and then we'll zoom in on some specific situations and some advice. So Julie, ladies first, I'm going to get you to tee us up with, can you share with us some of the life transitions where you've seen a financial planner really make a big difference, and what made that support so impactful during that transition?
Sure. Thank you, Evelyn. That's a great question. So, first of all, losing a spouse, preparing for retirement, and navigating a divorce are all big life transitions with a high degree of change with heightened emotions, where a financial planner can provide very valuable support. These transitions often include changes to household income, changes to household expenses, and in the case of divorce, division of assets as well. I've worked with many new widows and widowers that unfortunately do not have a good understanding of their overall household financial picture, even before the life event occurred. So naturally, one of the first things we want to do is to work with the clients to determine their current financial state. And that will involve reviewing a few key things. First of all, we're going to review all of their financial accounts, their bank accounts, their investment accounts, their retirement accounts. We will also then look at all of their sources of income, pensions, Social Security, and anything else that they have, of course. And then lastly, monthly expenses. We want to confirm also that they understand how all of the bills are currently being paid. So to start building their financial plan as single, we will next turn our attention to how their monthly cash flow is going to be changing. So for instance, we want to understand if they have access to survivor benefits on pensions, or do we understand how Social Security benefits are going to be changing? Just to name two examples, for instance. We will also turn our attention to tax planning next. So changing tax filing status from married filing jointly to single often results in a surprise
Big
increase
changes.
in taxes for folks. And this is because
Yeah.
the tax brackets for filing single are much more compressed. So individuals get into higher tax brackets much more quickly. On a related note, premiums for Medicare Part B and D are based on tax filing status and modified adjusted gross income. So unfortunately, often these premiums also increase for new widows and widowers as well. I also want to mention we also naturally review clients' investment portfolios. The target asset allocation that's established before any life event occurred may no longer make sense after the life event. So we want to work with the client to make sure that we come up with the most appropriate asset allocation that they are comfortable with and that they can commit to. And lastly, I'll just mention, it's natural to divide household labor so well that often the other spouse becomes completely removed from and unfamiliar with the responsibilities not on their plate, such as the household's finances. So in those situations, we want to naturally first spend time on just general awareness of the household's financial picture.
It's that could be a moment of also not only uncertainty, but perhaps a lack of confidence, or maybe even a little shame. I think about my own situation. My husband and I are both in the financial services industries, and we divide and conquer as well. And Mark takes care of budgeting and household cash flow. I'm in charge of the investments and things like that. And candidly, something happens to Mark, I am going to have to go learn what's been going on with our budgeting and our cash flow because he's been taking care of it for us all these years. And I can understand how somebody could feel maybe embarrassed because they didn't know more about their financial situation and feel like they should, in air quotes. And that, I think, really highlights how important and versatile good planning can be, because there is a technical side to it, but there's also very much a human side to it. And, Ross, as you think about major life changes being rarely just financial, how does a good planner support, not just the technical, but maybe talk a little more about the emotional side of a transition?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Evelyn. Julie did a great job of talking about the technical and financial stuff that's involved with life transitions, and so you have a good framework for that. But a good financial advisor also needs to be skilled at providing emotional support to clients when they're going through a difficult life transition. And that might include everything from showing them the empathy that they deserve, showing them that you truly understand the situation that they're going through, and that you validate any feelings that they might have had, like the shame that you mentioned, Evelyn. Um,
Mm.
Sometimes people bring things to the table when we're talking about finances too that can kind of get in the way, that can become a roadblock, whether it's a bias that they have or just something that they learned in childhood or from their parents. And so we're skilled in identifying those types of things that we can usually help coach clients through those types of situations, help them understand that they have a roadblock and we need to get past it. Often with in a life change situation, it's going to require the goals of the client to be reframed. So they may have already had a financial plan, for example, if it was a widow or widower with their spouse, but now life has completely changed. And so the goals that they had before may not be the same ones that they want to have going forward. And they might not even know what their goals are yet. It takes some time. So we can serve a role of being, we can encourage them, support them, and also be a source for self-care and emotional outside emotional support that they can get, whether it's grief counseling or access to a trained psychotherapist. Those are all things that we're used to dealing with clients and that we can provide resources. And I also think that the emotional part of things can sometimes help provide a really good structure, that uncertainty to a situation that feels very, very uncertain to the client. So by focusing on both the financial, technical, and the emotional aspects of the situation, the planner can become a really valuable partner and really help the client navigate the whole situation with confidence and grace and resilience.
That the role that you just described, I don't think many people think of that with their financial planner. They expect their planner to be helping with tax strategies and risk management and other very important but very technical things. But what you just described is very much soft, if you will. It's much more about emotion and how folks are feeling as they're navigating the transition. I remember one scenario with a client who was retiring. We had worked with this client for many years. They were in a great place from a financial perspective, but he was really struggling with how he was going to spend his days, what was going to provide meaning for him beyond golf once he was retired. And we actually helped him find a retirement coach. You know, this obviously wasn't a financial person. We could help with the financial side of things, but you mentioned that your financial planner can be a resource for professional services you may need beyond just the financial planning. And in this case, this retirement coach was very helpful in helping this client determine what's their new day going to look like once they're in retirement. So your planner can be just a tremendous source for both technical and on the more personal side of things when you're navigating a big transition. You know, logic and empathy, so important. But Russ, you mentioned sometimes there's a block. Sometimes in the middle of a major life transition, folks will freeze up and they could find themselves asking, I can't do all of it. I'm not sure I could do any of it. Can you just give me one? What do I need to do first? So Julie, maybe you can answer that. What are the most important first steps that somebody needs to take with their planner when life suddenly happens, especially when it feels overwhelming?
Sure, sure. So first of all, reach out to us and let us
Yeah.
know, what's happening or has happened. And we will ask a few key questions right off the bat. First of all, we're going to ask them to locate login credentials to all of their key accounts. Next, we're going to ask for either electronic or hard copies of recent financial and tax documents. If the client happens to have a safe or a safety deposit box, we're going to ask them a couple of questions related to that. First of all, do they know where it is? Do they have the keys? And if they do, they should open it up and take very careful inventory of those contents inside. Um, Again, we would ask them to reach out and contact all of their close family, friends, and advisors. And by advisors, I mean, in addition to their financial planner, it's often a good idea to also reach out to their CPA or their estate attorney in the case of losing a spouse, for instance. If we don't already have copies of estate planning documents, we're going to ask for those as well. And again, we want to confirm that they understand how all of the bills are being paid if we're dealing with the death of a spouse. We've talked about the emotional, aspect of all of these life transitions, and we're going to focus on reassuring clients that what they're going through is indeed very, very hard, leading with empathy and compassion. And we're going to meet with them when they have time and when they are ready to engage with us. We want to reduce client stress as much as we possibly can throughout
Right.
all of these life transitions. And that may include eliminating any of the shame, that Evelyn mentioned they may be feeling for any kind of lack of awareness that they feel like they should have, but don't, related to their household's finances. And we'll work together with the client to put together the pieces of what their new financial plan looks like together over time. That will come in time. And again, we want to take as much as possible off of the client's plate and reassure them that we are with them every step of the way.
Mhm. You know, Julie has a specialty in helping folks who've lost a spouse. Their spouse has died. And so what you've just described are very important next steps for somebody who's navigating that very unwelcome situation. And actually, Apella has a resource that can be helpful in situations like that called Priority Actions After a Death. It's a checklist of items that we normally would recommend our clients review if somebody that they love has died. And if you or somebody think that that would be helpful for them, please just reach out to us, whether you're a planner or if you're just a guest joining us today, just at our info@apellawealth.com, and we would be happy to share that with you. The other, certainly death of a spouse or somebody you love can be stop you in your tracks and maybe leave you frozen. But other life transitions can do that as well. And I'm sure you've all heard the joke, the tongue in cheek of how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. And so I think that regardless of what the transition is, if you're feeling completely stopped and frozen and truly uncertain about overwhelmed about, I have so much to do, I don't even know where to start. I'll go back to Julie's first comment about talk to your planner. Reach out to your planner, tell them the situation. I've one of our questions, I'll give a teaser for Julie and Ross to be thinking about. One of the questions that has come up in our Q&A is there any specific help for loss of a job? And so I'll ask that. I'll ask y'all to touch on that a little bit later during Q&A. But that how frightening and unsettling that can be. And so just talking to your planner and sharing, this has happened. What's next? What do I do next? Your planner has ideas unique to your situation about what can you should be doing next, because every transition is unique. And so you know, let's talk a little bit, Ross, about how do you adapt your approach for these different types of transitions or changes? Can you share how your advice changes depending on the type of transition? It's got to be different receiving an inheritance, which is a big transition or change, versus starting a business. Both big changes, but obviously quite different.
Yeah, absolutely. Two very different situations, which call for very different approaches from the advisor. With an inheritance, in most cases, that means there's probably been a death. So there's grief, there's emotional, feelings that are getting in the way of thinking about things and moving forward. And like Julie said, in situations like that, we really need to meet the clients where they are, and meet them with empathy and support and encouragement. Try to create some sort of structure that they need to move forward, even if that's just baby steps, a few little things here and there. You can't rush major financial decisions at a time like this. So sometimes focusing on the little things that you can do is important. And then the process really needs to unfold at the pace of the client and not, what we tell them they need to do. They need to tell us what they're ready to do. And so what we can do is help create a pathway for them to start moving forward and hopefully take bigger steps beyond those baby steps as they keep moving forward. With the business, starting a business, very different scenario. And I think our roles tend to be more collaborative in a situation like that, where we're going to help the client think through the risks and the rewards of starting a business. Most business owners, by their nature, are probably more comfortable with taking risk than a lot of people. And so we kind of need to check them on that a little bit and make sure that they're not, going to bet the house on this business venture and jeopardize all of their long-term, financial plans. So we'll get into, do you have the resources if something doesn't work out? What do we do? Those types of things. Um, the upside's tempting sometimes when you start a business. It's attractive, it can be exciting. But again, we really need to focus on the risk of taking that step forward and make sure that it doesn't jeopardize anything else that they've done for their financial planning scenarios. And we're not experts in areas like sales and marketing and operations and management that might be part of a business, but we know people who are. And so sometimes our best role is to be a sounding board for the client and a trusted partner and help them think through all of this. And if they need help and outside resources, we have the ability to refer them to people that can do that. So yeah, two very different situations. The advisor needs to be skilled in knowing how to approach each one of them.
So I really appreciated hearing both the technical differences, but again, back to emotional and personal differences. The kinds of support that your planner can provide is tailored, is tweaked to your specific situation. I have a particular expertise and passion for working with widows and divorcees. And even though those might seem like similar situations, in both cases, a spouse is gone, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, but they're obviously profoundly different. And it's important to tailor how we're helping our client navigate that to that specific situation. I will say that one thing I always tell our ladies, these widows and divorcees that we're working with is, and Ross, you touched on this, we'll move at the pace that's comfortable for you, and we will make sure that things that must be done by a certain time are done by then, because we don't want to ever have somebody penalized inadvertently by not being aware that there was a deadline that they needed to satisfy. And so we'll work very closely with them to make sure that it's at their schedule and that it also complies with any requirements that they have to fulfill as a result of the transition they're navigating. So let's say somebody is not surprised by the change, but is actually preparing for it. You know, retirement is an obvious one, maybe welcoming a new child to the family. So if you are actually anticipating a major life transition, you know, what kinds of questions they should be asking? You know, Julie, I'll volley this to you and then maybe see if Ross has any to add. But what are the best questions clients can be asking their planners during anticipating a transition or maybe in early stages of a transition?
Sure. We've touched on this in a few different ways today, but really prioritizing is one of the most important things, regardless of the type of life transition that a client is going through. So really, one of the most important first questions they can ask is, what should I focus on first? You know, so many of these life transitions can be very overwhelming and you don't know where to begin. So, you know, one of the keys to navigating these life changes while minimizing stress is prioritizing and breaking down the tasks into digestible pieces, and prioritizing appropriately. So your financial planner can help narrow the client's focus, so that they are spending their time, you know, on the most value add activities and the most time sensitive things first.
Right, right. I think that one question that I've received from a client when she was navigating a divorce, actually, she asked, "What's the most important thing I need to know?" Which I thought was a terrific question. And another good one I've found is, "How can you help me so I'm focusing on what's most important?" Ross, any you toss into the mix?
Yeah, it's more of a high level one, but I think it's what's on people's minds when they're coming to us in a situation like this is that, am I going to be okay? And usually the answer is yes, because we've already addressed this possibility that someone could die, someone could lose their job, someone could become disabled, and it's built into their financial plan. So the plan is very resilient in terms of this, but sometimes they need to hear that and be shown that they are going to be okay.
Exactly, exactly. My mother asks me that all the time. My longest term client, my mother, "Am I gonna be all right?" And I assure her all the time, "Yes, mom, you'll be just fine. You'll be just fine." All right. Speaking of the best financial planners ever, which my mom says I am, let's focus internally for a second. Let's point a bright light on ourselves. And you know, how can somebody evaluate whether their planner is the right fit in times like these? There are lots of very good financial planners out there, and if someone's wondering whether their current planner is the right fit for a life transition, what are the signs or the qualities they should be looking for? And Ross, I'll get you to lead on this, but then Julie, I'll invite you to add some color as well.
Yeah, so I think there's a number of things that a client can do to help determine whether their existing advisor is the right person. You want to know that they're experienced in dealing with clients like you who are going through situations like you are. You don't want to be their test case or their guinea pig, because you don't have to do that. And so you want their advice to be tailored to your particular situation, not some one size fits all cookie cutter approach. You want an advisor that has strong communication and skills and a strong level of empathy. They're good listeners. They're responsive. They hear you, and you know that they hear you. They're fiduciaries, meaning that they always put your interests above their own. And at Apella, that's one of the things that we lead with, that we really believe that strongly. And so someone needs to be willing to tell you that that's what they believe and that's what they plan to do. They need to be transparent about how their fees are charged and any other expenses related. If they have any conflicts of interest that needs to be disclosed and brought into the equation, those are all things that you should be asking and you're entitled to know. You want a financial advisor who's going to be proactive in your relationship and that they're anticipating the future. They're thinking about possibilities. Um, this is just one transition that you're going through right now. Maybe there could be others. And so we need to be thinking about those and get together regularly for check-ins and, just to talk about how you're doing in the future. And if the services require, like, both Julie and Evelyn referred to, if you need more expert tax advice or tax preparation assistance or legal advice, we have the resources that we can tap outside our firm to bring to bear on the situation. And then the other thing that you can do is make sure that your advisor has a very strong track record. And one way to do that is to check their credentials. If they're a certified financial planner, a CFP, or a chartered financial analyst, a CFA, that tells you that they've met at least a bare minimum of education requirements. They've passed an exam, showing that they know the content. They're following a code of ethics that their profession requires, and that they're subject to continuing education requirements on an ongoing basis so that they're staying fresh with the profession and any changes that are coming along. And then the other thing that's kind of good to do, I think, is there's a website called FINRA.org. It's FINRA.org, and it's the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. They have a database where you can literally check out every financial advisor or every broker or other firms just by typing those names into their website. And then that gives you a good sense of their experience, other firms that they've been involved with in the past, if there's any disciplinary history that they've been subject to. Lots of good just background and historical information that you can find out about a broker or a financial advisor.
I'll just add to Ross's comments. We've talked a number of times today about the situation where someone loses their spouse. There was a McKenzie study from 2020 that found that actually 70% of new widows changed their financial advisor in the first year after losing their spouse. So that's a pretty astounding figure if you think about it. So what's going on here? Well, a couple things. It could have been that the widow wasn't the one who formed the relationship to begin with the financial advisor. But regardless of that, the advisor clearly hasn't done a good job establishing or maintaining the relationship with the remaining spouse, either before, during, or after that life event. And also their needs clearly were not being met. They weren't being heard, and their priorities and concerns likely were not being addressed. So it's just a very helpful, astounding statistic that is good to be aware of.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, I have a particular passion and expertise in helping women facing significant life transitions. And I remember being at a professional event with a lot of other financial planners. This has been many years ago, but it stuck with me because I shared with a colleague who was attending what I did and this interest I had in taking care of widows and divorcees. And he said, wow, you can have them because I hate it when they cry in my conference room. And I don't know if he was being tongue in cheek or trying to be funny, but I was so annoyed that I did not check what I said. And what I said was, you are not ever allowed to meet with any of those women again, ever. But even if he was being tongue in cheek, different planners have different areas of expertise, different focus areas. And so I think that it's if you're facing a big life transition and you're not feeling supported the way that you would expect by your financial planner, know that there are planners out there that can provide that level of support that you are seeking. Because at the end of the day, what we as planners want most is to help our clients navigate these big life transitions smoothly elegantly and to help them accomplish all that's most important to them. And with that as our mic drop, let's open the floor to your questions. So give me a second. Let me sort through these really quick. 1 second, and I'm going to cough. 1 second.
Cue the music. Poor Evelyn.
I'm sorry about that. Okay, so here's one that came in from Maria in Florida. If a divorce occurs, can I still get Social Security based on my spouse's higher Social Security benefit? Julie, why don't you take a swing at that one?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. So I would say it depends. There are a few key rules that would determine the full answer to that. So first of all, the marriage needed to have lasted at least 10 years. That's the first thing that needs to be met. Also, the divorced spouse cannot remarry. So second criteria. Third criteria, you need to be at least 62 years old. And so if all those three things are met, then yes, you could be eligible for the prior spouse's Social Security benefit. Sorry, you're on mute, Evelyn.
Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't want to cough in anybody's ear.
Yeah.
You know, as with all things Social Security, it is complex. The rules are kind of Byzantine. There seems to be a million exceptions, and this is really a place that your financial planner will be important to help guide you through that, because it depends is a very much an integral part of the answer to that question. You know, we received another question, and in the Q&A, two of them that are kind of related. One, is there any specific help for the loss of a job? And then I'll call it a corollary to that is, you know, what should someone, this is from Cole in California, what should someone considering a career change think about if they're unsure what they're transitioning to? And so these are you know, related. So Ross, why don't you take a swing at that? And then Julie, if you have any color to add, that'd be great.
Yeah, this is an old adage that I've heard, and I think it's an excellent one to think about for any decision, a big change decision that you're looking to make. And so always make sure you're really clear that you're running towards something and not running away from something. So you really do need to be clear about what's next. It's hard to make that decision, you know, in a logical manner without really understanding what you're moving to. So, you know, sit down, spend some time with yourself, get your notepad out, think about the things that you like to do, the jobs that are attractive to you, talk to your friends and your family. They can give you that kind of support. If it's a job loss, that's obviously very different. A lot of companies do provide counseling resources for people that are losing their jobs. And also most states that have unemployment insurance also offer similar type you know, workshops that you can go to try to find a new job. They can assist you with putting together a resume, things like that. So there are some resources out there. You might have to ask about them a little bit, but they're out there.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that would be, you know, in the case of a job loss, you'll want to think about your sources of liquidity, right? Because at the end of the day, of course, we all have bills to pay, right? So sources of liquidity, of course, you know, bank accounts for first and foremost. One of the first things that we talk about with new clients is establishing an emergency fund. You know, life brings unexpected, you know, expenses, which could include losing a job. So it's always a good idea to have at least 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses in an emergency fund to buy you time, right? Like if there is an unexpected job loss.
And I'll tack on to this that you're depending on how the loss of the job happened, if this was a decision you made and you're leaving, that, you know, has implications for continuation of benefits or things like that. If it was a termination situation, there might be something different as far as a severance package or things like that. So the details in that situation matter. However, there are legal requirements regarding payment of accrued paid time off, regarding health insurance coverage beyond your employment and being available to you for that you pay for yourself. And so your planner, if you've recently been informed that your services are no longer required or it's imminent, make sure you're contacting your planner right away, because we can do some huddling around this and help create an emergency plan, not just for the emergency savings, which we hope you have been working on for a while, but also sort of a tactical, okay, what do we do now approach to the situation. So while it may not ease the anxiety of, wow, I've got to go find a new job, it may answer the question of, well, what do I do about health insurance and things like that. Let's see. I've got another one here. And this is from Paul in Texas. Do you have a good way to document important information for my spouse or kids before I die? And he added in parentheses, not my estate documents.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. So beyond estate documents, there are estate planning organizers. We have a template, and that's what they are, is templates to help you document all sorts of things. It could help, I mentioned earlier, locating login credentials for all key accounts. That's one example of something. Or the location of, keys to safety deposit boxes, things like that. So these estate planning organizers are a great supplement to estate docs, so that your family members are well aware, everyone knows where to find the important things.
Yeah, and that can take the form of many different things. I have a client that has a 3-ring binder that he brings to all of our meetings, and we update it with information. And it's there. He's got a copy for his wife and for his children. That might be a little old school for a lot of people today, and you could do the same thing electronically, obviously. But again, like Julie said, you just need to make sure that someone else knows your passwords and your login IDs for those most important accounts like banks and brokerage accounts and Social Security and everything else that's important when someone does pass away.
Yeah. So Ross, I'm going to piggyback on that question. Should people talk about money with their kids before they die? Should people be talking about this? Because nobody likes talking about death.
You mean as soon as they're
And so
born?
if the answer is yes, why or when? Right, right.
Yeah, I mean, there's schools of thought, and there's actually been studies about what's the right time to start talking to your kids. And I think your question's a little different, but somewhere between the age of 7 and 12, I've heard is a good time to start exposing your kids to money, everything from, saving versus investing versus spending versus giving, are different buckets that you can have them, get exposed to and learn about. But grown children, especially I think in families that tend to be more wealthier, they don't always have the
Mhm.
skills that the parents do in terms of handling money. And so we really do make an effort to bring the children into the process and get them involved early. I would say in their 20s, if they're working and they have their own needs, they need to make decisions about 401ks and life insurance and benefits through their company. We can help with that. And building that relationship is really helpful, because when the time comes that mom and dad are no longer around, you've already got that transition kind of dealt with in advance, and they have a relationship with a trusted advisor, and you know everything that you need to know about them to be a good advisor to them as well.
I
Mhm.
just want to piggyback on what Ross was saying
Yeah,
just for a second is, often for many folks, these conversations are very uncomfortable, right? Very, very awkward. So you can lean on us, lean on your financial planner to help, facilitate the discussion and just kind of make it a little bit easier. We're happy to facilitate those conversations. We do it all the time.
absolutely, absolutely. And I always tell folks nobody wants like a Hollywood moment reading of the will situation where somebody discovers something is different with the estate than they thought it was going to be. You generally try we would encourage you not to surprise your family with your estate plans. We'll want to let them know, especially if you're intent on ensuring relationships go well after your death. Don't let it be a surprise. Um, Particularly for things like powers of attorney or medical a medical power of attorney. If you have named somebody in your estate documents to be your voice if you can't speak for yourself, and that's what a medical power of attorney is, or a financial power of attorney, don't let that person discover this when the moment has arrived and you are unable to speak for yourself. You've been in a car accident, you're in a coma in the hospital, and they get a phone call saying you're named as the medical power of attorney. That's not the moment you want them to hear about that. You want to talk with them about this and share with them what's important to you. What would you want them to do on your behalf? So your financial planner is skilled and experienced at helping folks talk with their families or their named representatives as part of their estate documents. Okay, let me see. I've got, here, one more from Steve in California. And he asks, how do we determine if I or we have any survivor benefits?
So I assume that question is related to pensions, or is that your understanding, Evelyn?
There wasn't additional context, and so I would say let's go with pensions. Mhm.
Okay, so I would say if you have a pension and you're wondering if there are survivor benefits, reach out to your HR department to ask for the plan documents. You're going to want to understand all of the detail. They can give you several things. They can give you the generic plan documents for the entire plan, as well as your specific benefits. And the specific benefits that are entitled to you will be, should note if there are survivor benefits or not.
And ideally, you already know
Okay.
that you are entitled to survivor benefits because you've talked about that with your financial advisor or, whoever is involved with the surviving situation. Also, with survivors, it usually if someone's died and their death at some point becomes public, and so that will start a train going. Like Social Security will be in touch. We're sorry about the loss of your spouse. Insurance companies where there's life insurance, or a lot of people don't know that your automobile insurance carries with it a death benefit in many cases. So making sure that everybody that's important financially that you did business with knows about the death, and then it's their job to let you know if you're entitled to any survivor benefits.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ross. And I was going to comment about the Social Security, but you brought up a great point as well about sometimes these insurance policies that you wouldn't have expected, like homeowners or more likely an auto insurance policy has benefits that you may not have been aware of, and they're not big, but they're every bit can help. Every bit
Yep.
can help. So, well, thank you both for fielding all these ad hoc questions and for sharing with us today, sort of big picture and then more specific situations where a financial planner can really make a difference in helping somebody navigate a significant life transition. Not just your expertise, but your stories as well. We really appreciate that. And for our guests and clients joining us today, we really hope this conversation gave you some insight into how a strong financial planner, a strong financial partnership can provide clarity, steadiness, and even some comfort during life's biggest transitions. Because let's face it, life doesn't always arrive on schedule. And when it changes, it really helps to know that you have someone who knows your values as well as your numbers. And so if this has sparked questions or ideas for your own situation or for someone you care about, we'd love to continue this conversation. So please give us a call. This is what we're here for. We'd love to talk with you about this. We also hope that you will join our next Apella Academy webinar. It's going to be on July 9th with Apollo Lupescu from Dimensional Fund Advisors. He's going to share a mid-year update with us. He's a client favorite. for good reason. So you don't want to miss this, and save the date and watch for an invitation from us in just a couple of weeks. We'll also be sending you a recording of this webinar once it's passed through compliances. So watch for that later this week or maybe early next week. And as I'll wrap by sharing a quote from William James, an American psychologist, who said, "Life is in the transitions. We have to accept them, name them, mark them, share them, and eventually convert them into fuel for remaking our life stories." And we hope that your next transition, whatever it may be, would be one that you walk through with confidence and with the right people by your side. Thanks again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at another Apella Academy webinar very soon.